So our next speaker is Wanun. She's from Thailand, Climate Watch. So please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be talking on the SDG from the climate justice perspectives. The question to me is, are we on track on achieving the SDG? And if you are looking out from our work with the local communities, with different groups, we've been looking at the SDG from a non-silo manner, rather than looking at SDG by individual SDG. We are trying to use the opportunity of the SDG to engage the local communities to understand how it is important, and also how the local context could also fit into the current debate at the national and also regional and international on the SDG. What is really pressing and also really quite a threat among us as of now, not talking about COVID pandemic or COVID-19, I'm talking about the impacts of climate change. If you could go to the next slide, please. From the local perspectives, climate change, they are not scientists, and they can also observe what are those impacts onto their lives and their livelihood. And when scientists and also many of the policymakers are talking about climate change, they might be talking about the sea level rise, storms, floods, and those kind of physical impacts. But to communities, it is not only about the physical impact of climate change. It is about the social, economic, and livelihoods impacts of the climate change. So what is happening if they are longer period of droughts? So that means they couldn't grow rice. So without rice, they don't have income, they don't have food to eat within their family. They cannot also sell rice in order to earn other incomes. And also with the droughts, some of the crops are also dying. So they could also observe that a prolonged period of drought have also caused damages to their crops, fruit crops, for example, like some of plums and also mangoes. So these are not just only the physical impacts, but the associated impacts of those droughts and also climate change or physical impacts of climate change are also sending and affecting their economic and also their social and livelihoods conditions. So that means they would have less money, they would have less social and cultural aspects when there are droughts, prolonged droughts. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And what we are trying to do is not just only imposing the SDG and the climate issues onto the local communities and the people. Rather, we're using the word localizing SDG, but not in the sense that we have the SDG and then you bring the SDG to the local communities. But on the other side, we are taking SDG from the local context and then bring it up to the policy level. So we are talking about what it means by sustainability among the local communities. So we've been engaging with a number of groups, local communities, from farmers to fisher folks, women's group, a marginalized group, in order to share experiences on what they think that could be sustainability to them within their local context. So with those exercises, different groups are sharing, learning, and also they've been trying to link the SDG to trying to link the issue of climate impacts onto other issues of the SDG. And then they also plan for how to make use of those information that they get or the experiences on the ground that they are having. And also they are planning to make some changes, not just only by individual households or a community level, but also at the policy level. Next slide, please. And from those exercises, communities, different groups at the community levels, they've been doing and making their own indicators. And that indicators are from their local context, their process of understanding how to engage with the SDG discussion at the national level. So those indicators are something that they will be monitored through time through the national implementation of the SDGs. For example, for the climate change, they have identified that not only the climate that they'll be looking at, but they're looking at the health issue, the food security issue, the water issue, and those are also in different individual SDG targets. So in that sense, they have already put the indicators in a non-silo manner where they will be monitored through time. And also they are trying to come up with the intervention or the policy intervention and recommendations in order to make sure that those at the policy level who are working and responsible for SDG implementation and also the climate plans and policies are listening to them. And from those exercises on the ground, they have also introduced and also initiated dialogue with the government, the respective government who are working on the SDG. For Thailand, these kind of dialogues have also led to a so-called CSO government open-ended working group chaired by the CSO and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So that would also be kind of the an entry point for local and grassroots and also CSOs engagement in intervening and also making their voices heard at the policy level. And also it's on the advocacy level. I'll talk in more detail on this in my next slide, but also you can see from the picture, from the sharing and also learning of the experiences and the SDG as related to the climate issues, individuals and also household levels, they have also trying to implement their own climate actions. For example, they know about the climate-induced droughts and also the cost of climate change. So they've been implementing using the different seeds that are resistant to droughts and also using different kinds and ways of growing rice because there are drought period. And also they've been implementing and using solar panel in order to produce electricity for their household consumption. So these are the initiatives on the ground implemented and practiced by some of the community members. And if you're asking, where do they get the money? It's from their own money. So imagine if you are looking at climate impacts are already impacting them, but now they are using their own money to do the measures that would help them to survive. So, so those are kind of the what is happening on the ground. And with the next slide, please. And this is part of the advocacy. So from learning to sharing and to having their own indicators, and also using the opportunity available whenever it is available. People are also joining and collaborate with other networks. So different movements are also calling for temperature limit to 1.5 degrees. And also with the great mobilization and also engagement of the local communities and also grassroots, they've also been able to do their own campaigns and also demands in different places in Thailand. So you've seen like people are using their cards in the shape of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and where there are big conferences in Thailand in front of the UN, they are also voicing their concerns. These are political moments that people are using as well in order to voice their concerns. So it's, and they are not talking from various, they're not talking from the, what I mean is they are talking from their own experiences and also their own observation. For example, they're talking that coal are already impacting them, so they don't really need coal-fired power plants. So those are kind of the messages from the exercises that we have. So in different calls, and you can see the voices of the people were also brought into a regional and also international arena in order to call for temperature limit to 1.5 and calling for stopping support and finance on coal and fossil fuels, and also demanding for finance for climate adaptation and loss and damage. Next slide, please. And then just recent, early with this year, with the COVID pandemic, I think it gives us the opportunity to look at the reality on the ground and also the global picture. So different countries are having different measures for lockdown and quarantine measures. But I mean, for so many communities, the lockdown means staying at home. And with staying at home, then those who are also really need to get to earn money, because the COVID-19 happened during the drought period, for example, in Thailand. So drought period means they are not growing rice. So that means they are earning their lives from something else, like selling food and also going and selling things in the market and getting mangoes, delivering mangoes to customers, exporting mangoes, for example. So staying at home means they can't really earn their living. And even with farmers, they have food to eat on a daily basis, but they also have to pay for some other things. So in that case, and they have to save the money that they are supposed to earn during the drought period for the next rice cropping period. So that means they don't have the money in order to invest in this period, in this time, because they can't really go out and find some work and earn the money. So so with the lockdown, it also have some serious impacts onto the poor, especially farmers and among others. And the same thing as with the climate. The poor and also many marginalized communities are badly affected. So we could also see that there are some similarities in terms of the response to COVID and also the climate impacts. So in that sense, the COVID situation has also leading us to the possibility of rethinking about the new paradigm or new developments as well. And also, if you look at the from our communities in Thailand, the confinement, the control of the COVID also aligns with the solidarity within the local community. So members in the local communities are also helping each other. So they are acting also as a watchdog in order to make sure that each individual members in the community, they are not affected. They are not, they also have enough protection, for example, like masks. And also they are acting at screening at the entry point of the village. So these kind of cares and also services are already provided by community. And it has to also be realized because they are also the ones making sure that COVID-19 is controlled and there's no and people and within their communities are also protected. And then I think from the COVID, it has also made people think that governments are also doing what is impossible to make those impossible possible. So I mean, it's the Thai government has cut the budget 20 to 30% of the annual budget in order to solve the COVID-19. And despite the fact that previously, before the COVID, they were saying that the government doesn't have a lot of money to do social and basic services. But with COVID, you have seen a number of collaborations that during the normal situation, it wouldn't be very effective coordination. But with COVID, what has already been impossible, it's already made possible. So in terms of the CO2 emissions, I mean, the lockdown also mean no emission, less emissions, less transport. So those kind of stuff, during the normal situation, it wouldn't be possible. But government are doing it in a week in order to control the COVID. So what we've seen in terms of what can't be possible, it's becoming possible. And also, as we think in terms of how are we going to move forward. So let's think about the new normal that has to be respect the human rights, no human rights violations, protecting the ecological and also enhancing environmental and ecological balances. What about in terms of the depending on the market? So the COVID has also led us to the think that market and also the big corporations are not saving us. So what is saving us is the food on the ground. If you conserve and also have a very good environmental and also natural resources protection, then you can go into the forest and get some food. So those are also really proved to be very efficient in a very, very better way for communities to survive during the COVID in terms of the food security. And also with all the investments to come after the pandemic. So we also really need to support the long-term transition to something that is socially just, equitable, and climate resilient. So with these, I mean, some of the concrete example could also be there's no need to continue the carbon-intensive society, for example, like using more coal-fire, using more coal and fossil fuels, and using the government's budget to subsidize coal or investing more on coal and fossil fuels. So these have to be stopped in order to build the new way of resilience and also chances of the people and also community to have their resilience to the impacts of climate change and other shocks that will be coming. And I think...
One minute. One minute, okay.
Yeah, I'm stopping. And also, we also need to make sure that coal is not continued. And as we see in the Asian continent, we are really consuming a lot of coal for our economic growth. So it's not just only ignoring the climate impacts and also the temperature rise and also the natural resources degradation, but these are also led to the profits to the corporates rather than the well-being of the local communities. So these have to be stopped, and I think in Asia continent, coal must also be stopped and de-invested. So with that, I'll stop and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Wanun. She bring us back to environment issue and not only social, economic, but environment. How we see that, and also bring us to if the market cannot function, and maybe we only depend on the food on the ground, then maybe we can be closer to the nature.